All right, today we're going to try something a little different. We're going to do some troubleshooting lightning rounds, see what questions we can find out there, and see if we can provide any input that will help people figure out how to make their quads fly as best as possible. Okay, the first one we got here is from Chad Brown. He says, "Hey UAV Tech, I have a video on a 5-inch quad. It's always perfect. It's Helibro F4. You can see the Mach 2 linears. You can see some other products there that's making up this quad. I was doing some light speed turns to test props, and my video was perfect. Then mid-flight, and then he gives me a link, did the ESC blow. This quad still has good performance. So a good performing quad, but let's see what we had in the video. It's actually what I saw. So you can see already in the intro of this what it was. So let's go check it out some more. All right, so let's check out this clip. This is what I played at the intro here, but I didn't have the sound on. I was in the way. So let's go ahead and play it. It's like 20 volts, maybe not fully charged 6S. Should be able to hear audio pretty good. A lot of jello, a lot of shake. Alright, just listen a little bit more here. Probably just more of the same, I would guess. Yeah, there's the landing. Alright. So what I would recommend on anything like that is a couple things to check out. It's definitely not an ESC problem like he had in his question. It sounded like that he was doing some flying and it just kind of started shaking like this all of a sudden, kind of mid-flight. So although I don't think it's this, the first thing I would always do, because it's always cheap when you ever have a shakes or jello issue, is change the props. And if you have some different types of props, or if you had props that you know performed well, so if you was flying HQ and everything was great before, I would get out some brand new HQ props. But if you've never had good luck, say it's a new issue for you, or it's always been like this on a quad, try a different brand of props, especially on the micro classes. So any shakes and jello, especially on the micro classes, 4-inch and below, try different brands of props. If it's on a 5-inch, in this case, he was flying all right, then it's started off. So props cheap, easy, switch out, do that. The next thing I would check after switching out the props is make sure that the components are nice and secure and tight. So make sure the frame is tight, make sure the camera is tight, and the camera itself, sometimes inside the camera mount or inside the casing of the camera, the circuit board that has the sensor in it can become loose. So you have to take the camera apart, just take the back plate off the analog camera, or even, I've never seen it on a digital camera so far, but analog cameras it happens, and that was analog, and it just needs some double-sided sticky tape to stick the sensor and the circuit board that's in there, which has the sensor, to the back of the camera plate or something, just to get it a little bit more secure. You can put some other things in there, obviously non-conductive things to kind of tighten it up in there. So do that. That is generally, if it's not a props, it's generally the camera. Something's loose in the camera housing. And you compare, if you have a GoPro on there, you can just compare your GoPro footage to your analog feed footage. If you don't have one of those, you just have to take it over and explore it. In addition to that, I would just double check, if this happened kind of mid-flight, like that camera could have just become loose kind of mid-flight. Same thing with wires hitting the gyro or the flight controller. Make sure all the wires are up off the flight controller. Make sure nothing's touching of that nature. And then obviously just check the frame. Make sure the arms aren't loose, things of that nature, because those all could come loose during flight, or a wire could, find its way down and start slapping on the top of the gyro, things like that. So those are all things that could happen mid-flight. Antenna, if you have a loose antenna starting to wobble around all of a sudden. So just look at those kind of mechanical things to make sure they're all in order. Finally, if it's jello, so that wasn't really jello, that was shakes, but if you see like this rippling thing coming down through the screen, that's more jello. Then I would go into Betaflight and go here into the motors tab. I would take all the props off, and then I would spin each motor up looking at this graph up here, and you can set this to accelerometer to be even more sensitive, and then you can take this down to 10 millisecond range for that, and then you can adjust the scaling to make it more or less sensitive as well. And what this will do is you're trying to compare one motor shakes versus the other. So you want to have it very uniform. You might want to take your quad and put it on a paper towels or a towel or something, or put it on the desk that's, you know, if it has little feet and things of that nature, that you're not going to have it. Obviously, if you have no feet or stands on it, you have like the quad sitting on the desk on the metal screws, that could be different from one thing to another. But you're trying to kind of get a gist of how did this motor, what's the vibrations of this motor versus another motor, you know, out of the four you have. And if you see one that's really out of line, it could be a bad bearing, or it could just be the bell is off balance. But again, that's more for Jello. What he saw there in that FPV footage was more of the shakes. So I would first go to props. Then I would start looking at all the mechanical things, like it's probably the sensor, honestly. It's probably the next thing if it's not the props. The camera sensor, frame, all those things I covered before about the antennas and all that kind of wires and all that kind of jazz. Honestly, if it's still the shakes, I would run some logging to see if you have electrical noise issues, which I'll drop a link down below on that because I kind of didn't mention that there before. And then if it's not the shakes and you think it's kind of more of a jello-y thing, then I would do this motor bell test to see if it's that. So here's another one. Gentleman is using a Tango 2 with a Radiomaster Ranger module, 2-watt version. Sounds like it's ExpressLRS, and he's having some binding issues. He's got some details here about the lights. I don't really know what that's what they're supposed to be, so it doesn't really help anything. But it's a Radiomaster ExpressLRS module. And it never turns. So he's using binding using the 3-power on-off or the Wi-Fi. I'm not using the binding password when binding. Either I do then with Wi-Fi. So I guess he means like the mod, you know, the Lewis script and hitting bind, or the 3-power on-off method. Also then both TX and RX. I'm trying to figure out the issue with the power supply. I don't know what's going on with that. I'm missing something with the binding phrase. So my advice, and I'm not really sure on this one, and I'm kind of in the way on it, but my advice is, sounds like a hardware issue, maybe, I don't know. But I would, in my experience, when things bind, they should stay bound. So I would try, personally, I would try the binding phrase, and if then try a new receiver, a different receiver, and see if it is. So yeah. If anybody has any ideas on this one, drop them down in the comments below. See if we can help this gentleman out. I don't know specifically what that one is, but that's where I would go with it. Okay, here's another one. After a crash pretty hard at the race, the drone for some reason is starting to do small twitches when I do throttle punches. It is doing a small twitch when I do throttle punches. All motors spin fine when connected to Betaflight, and they are all perfectly smooth. I attached a black box log with a few throttle punches. The twitches start after the second and third punch. Please help. Let's check it out. So open this up. I'm going to go first to trace template number 4 here, and let's check out the first throttle punch. So you can see in this one, I'm looking down here at the motor specifically, and in this one it looks like motor number 1 is weaker than the others for some reason. So unless there's some bias that's pushing more weight down on this right-hand corner, there's something's wrong there. And that happens here again. Now, I did look in this at a little bit in advance. Now that seems to have shifted on this throttle punch to the front. So you can see that this is kind of dropping that front. Look at this graph up here. You can see it's kind of dropping that front, right front or left front arm. And then it picks it up. So that's why, like if I go to trace template 0 here, noise plots, just to look at that, you can see how off course. So these lines here, this is the actual quad movement. This is your stick input. So as you can see, he's moving the sticks down. Well, he's moving them back, honestly, because the quad's leaning front on this pitch move. So he's moving back to compensate. Same thing here. He starts to roll to the right because the quad's going to the left. You can kind of, you can see his reaction because the quad starts going to the right, so he starts to stick input to the left to kind of compensate just a little bit. You can see right there. But that's really all coming from this motor desync issue. This looks like a desync, and then it catches itself. Yeah, so again, this back motor then again seems like it's desyncing. So it's interesting. We had the one and then the other. This back one again having an issue. So motor's smooth, all that kind of good stuff smooth. Let's take a look back at what he said here. Had a crash in a race. So I guess what I would try to do is I would go into BL Heli firmware. I really think you have an ESC problem. That's my guess, that it's probably not a motor problem. It's one of the ESCs is being a little wonky. I would check to make sure all the electrical connections and everything to the ESC, basically from the ESC motors, or ESC outputs to the motors, are all good joints. Maybe remelt the joints on motor 1 and then on motor 4. Just resolder, have those remelted, make sure that they're not like a cold joint scenario that got a little loose or whatnot. The other thing you can do is check your, it's probably not this, but just double check that that capacitor is on there nice and tight. That usually, if the capacitor is broken loose, you'll get some electrical noise introducing. So I don't think it's really that, but while you're in there, double check that. Maybe remelt those if you're right at it. From there, you could try different ESC PWM frequency, but honestly, you're kind of covering it up. If it was working before, you had a really hard crash, I think you have ESC damage. I don't know what specifically in the ESC, but that's what it looks like to me. You could do things like wire, the front 2 motors to the back 2 ESC pads, right? Like switch, wire this motor to this ESC pad back here and vice versa on the other side to see if it should then be these 2 motors having the issues, not these 2. And that would definitely show that your ESC is the problem, because obviously the motor's switching. It would show that that's the problem. So that's what I would try. Fortunately, it looks like you have some ESC damage. So this is an old one I just saw here, so we'll hit it because I think it's a good one. When I arm and bring it up, the motors flutter like crazy. The motors get hot, burn me 30 seconds after flight. Stock PIDs on Betaflight 4.4. It happens more when the action camera is on, which makes me think it's a CG or weight thing. But that doesn't make any sense to me. It's a 5-inch Source 1 V5 frame. I would love to know what's happening to tune it out. And let's go check out the video. All right, here we go. Yeah, that's not... If you ever arm your quad and you hear that sound, you need to land immediately. That sound will burn out your motors, or ESC, more likely your motors. You will smoke a motor within 10 to 15 seconds. So, yeah, I can definitely see that this is probably burning them. So let's listen to some more. When we say the fluttery sound to get to the D term limit, it sounds like this. That's not a vibration. That is a D term oscillation. The PID's overreacting. Bad stuff. Got some good smoothing, because you don't see any shake. See, it goes away when he full throttles it. So what I would say here, he already says it's stock Betaflight. I would just double check that that's actual stock Betaflight, because it's very odd that that would occur for stock Betaflight. What I would check on this build would make sure that your PWM frequency and your ESC firmware, so you'd be hooking up to BL Heli 32 or Blue Jay or BL Heli S. It depends which ESC you have, but make sure that it's at 24 kilohertz PWM frequency is the setting you see in there for all 4 ESCs, or 48. If you have ESC settings and that PWM is at 16, it could cause some, it'd be more like a grinding sound, but it could cause some issues if it's too low and your motors are a little bit too powerful. The next thing after that is I would just make sure that you, obviously on stock Betaflight, I would grab that master multiplier slider and slide it down. So let me show you what I mean. So here in Betaflight, what you need to do, and this should be stock, I think this is pretty much stock. you would go in and enable this expert mode. And then once you're on expert mode is grab this slider and bring this down. What you could do is bring this down. And again, you should not be having these issues on stock, but maybe you are. Maybe you have some really powerful motors on 6S and just, just not enough weight. Now it is odd, like you said, that it got worse when you put on an action camera, but maybe just the weight exacerbated. Usually it would get the other way around, but nevertheless, I would take these down to like a 20 range, like 20. It's probably not going to fly good, but you just want to get it flying at a smooth sounding. So again, the first thing we want to do is go into ESC settings, and what I would probably do is just set it to 48 kilohertz for now, just to make sure, because we're really just, we're not trying to make the quad fly better. We're not trying to increase flight performance and decrease prop wash and really hone that in. That's a separate thing. We just want to get it flying. So put it on 48K for now. It might not be the best for best performance, but we just want to get it flying. The second thing I would do is, like I said here, go down here, down that, no, the other way, down this way, here, down that one. There you go. Take that slider and slide it that way. There you go, that way, to decrease that D gain, which is here, yeah, right there. To decrease these D gains here, this derivative, yep, right here, not D max, down to like the 20 error. What could be happening here is that oscillation that you're getting is actually boosting your PID gains up. So your PID gains could be going up since you're getting a vibration. See here, that's the default PID gains, the 30 and 34, which are moderate, but since you're starting to get an oscillation, that could easily be taking them and pushing them up higher to the D max of 40 and 46, which is, it's not that high, honestly. But if you have really powerful motors, that could be the problem. It could be sliding those D gains up from that to that. There we go. And that could be your issue. So move that down, move that master slider down. And if you want to isolate and make sure that the D gains don't move there, what you can do is grab this dynamic damping slider and slide that all the way down. And then you'll see that these two are going to match here, right? And you're not going to have them moving up and down. Then you can just set this master and set this like in the low 20s range there to test something out. Okay, so that should do it for this one. Hopefully you found some of that stuff helpful. And if you have any input, or I got something wrong, or you have some other insights on some of those, there was like 2 of those I was like, I don't really know. Drop those down below and see if we can help each other out. If you appreciated this type of video, kind of a rapid fire of, well, not rapid, but yeah, drop a comment down below. Might do some more of these. Thanks, everybody, and I hope this helped.